Everyone, it's time again to recap the latest news from the solar PV industry compiled by the American Solar Energy Society. I'm Jay Warmke with SolarPVTraining.com, and this is what's happening in the wonderful world of solar for the week of February 15th. The Department of Energy's Office of Clean Energy has lost the staff required to properly oversee the $27 billion in funded energy projects, according to a new assessment from the Government Accountability Office, or GAO. The loss of capacity is due to the Trump administration's deep cuts in the agency's federal workforce. The Office of Clean Energy lost more than 80% of its staff in 2025, including every person that was hired to independently assess and monitor the costs of big government-funded projects. Over the course of last year, the agency canceled about 35 of the projects, or about 1/3 of all funded developments. However, the GAO found that the agency still has not defunded or pulled the money from these projects, so it remains unclear what happens to the unspent money. So in summary, it appears that even though the DOE has canceled 1/3 of the federally funded renewable energy projects, this action may not actually save taxpayers any money at all, and they do not have staff to monitor and administer the remaining projects that are still fully funded. In recent years, the time to connect a data center to the power grid has grown significantly, sometimes taking as much as 5 years before the application is even reviewed. In response, many data center developers are choosing to build their own power plants and avoid the grid altogether, or perhaps connect to it later after the data center is fully operational. CleanView Capital, a finance company that specializes in leasing clean energy systems, last week released a report in which they identified 46 data centers with a combined capacity of 56 gigawatts that plan to build their own power systems behind the meter. That represents roughly 30% of all planned data center capacity within the United States. In the last 12 months, the behind-the-meter trend has gathered momentum. Of the 46 projects indicated in the report, 90% were announced in 2025. As load demand soars, putting pressure on the existing electrical grid, the new demand will likely be met by increased solar generation, according to the Energy Information Administration, or EIA. We expect a 17% increase in solar generation in 2026 and an additional 23% increase in 2027, and wind generation increase by 6 and 7% respectively over these years, EIA projected. And while the EIA suggests that 2026 will be a banner year for solar, the nonpartisan think tank E2 reported that 2025 was a year of loss in investments, jobs, and manufacturing across the American renewable energy industry. In a recent report, E2 noted that last year over 38,000 manufacturing jobs were eliminated throughout the renewable energy industry. Additionally, the manufacturing sector saw $30.2 billion in losses. The EV and battery businesses canceled more than $42 billion in projects, which counted for the most cancellations in any sector within the renewable energy industry. While the solar workforce remained basically unchanged, a total of 61 large federally supported projects were canceled, closed, or downsized during the year, which represented $34.8 billion worth of cancellations. Solar developer Open Roads Renewables plans to invest roughly $98 million in a 94-megawatt Crossroads solar grazing center, which would use land in 3 townships in Morrow County, which is located about an hour north of Columbus, Ohio. A public hearing was held last month before the Ohio Power Siting Board, or OPSB, the state's central authority for energy permitting. The project must also undergo a review by the various townships that are affected by the development. While the Power Siting Board staff had initially deemed Crossroads Solar to be in the public interest, meaning it would likely receive approval, it later changed its mind, citing township lawyers' claims of overwhelming opposition by local residents. However, a review of public comments filed with the Power Siting Board found that at least 34 instances in which people apparently gave false names or lied about whether or not they lived within the county of residence there. Dozens were submitted anonymously, so they could not be verified. And all of these unverified comments were negative or against the project. After discarding the apparently false, anonymous, or duplicate comments from the same individuals, reporters found that more than 78% of all of those comments filed before the board that could be authenticated were in favor of the development. Developers are now awaiting a final ruling by the OPSB, expected by March 19th. And that's the news from the solar industry for this week. We'll see you next week.